many frequencies in my body. And apparently it's difficult for me to sort of discharge or get rid that gets stuck in my body. Is that possible?
Could be. Everything is possible. I'm not sure. Let's see if we've got time to. We've got your first question, which hopefully we can address.
I'm not sure if it's your volume. I cannot hear you very well. I don't know if it's just me or...
I keep on getting a signal that my internet's not very good.
I can hear you fine, Jeff.
Possibility, but my volume... Oh, I can... You hear me? Is everyone hearing me? Okay. We'll wait another few moments.
Hi.
So those of you that haven't got videos on, if you can just click on the icon, the video icon, and get your video on if you have it. But I think we're about to start. So welcome everybody. Wonderful to see your faces and some new ones that haven't been on. So always wonderful to be together. So I have a number of questions that were sent, and please feel free. I'll try and keep my eye on the chat. And answer whatever comes up. I have a written question from Sylvia here about the water situation in Cape Town. Not a life alignment problem, but seeing that it's part of our field, it is quite critical here in Cape Town. I've just been in Module 6 in the mountains near Durban, where it rained a ton, so we were soaked. But here it's very, very dry, and people are becoming aware, very aware of the resource of water. It's something I think everybody should do around the globe. It is our most precious resource, and we're all extremely wasteful. It's interesting, I was in the Module 6 where there's abundance of water, but I kept the same awareness. Now, of course, it's not, not flushing the toilet and showering for a minute or so, but just to hold in consciousness this resource and all of our resources that we take for granted. But water is something we take so for granted. So my wish for everybody is to become mindful of this. And I certainly, it's critical, it's affecting many people in many situations, but I appreciate the experience for myself. I know I lived with this in Israel many years back when there was severe restrictions. Anyway, that's the situation with water in Cape Town. We're hoping for rain. I'm trying to manifest it somehow, but I keep on getting the indication that no, we need to go through this and learn some very precious lessons from it. So hopefully it'll come. All right, so done with the water situation in Cape Town. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to address. One from Sophie. I don't know if you're there, Sophie. I haven't seen your face. You there at all? Don't see you. But it's about heavy metals. Could you advise and share knowledge about what heavy metals do to the body and how to self-detox? I just did Vortex and learned that there is a point and a card to use specifically. There are maybe also other tips and actions to do. Read food, water, and air. I also heard that heavy metals may have an impact on the DNA and keep us in low frequencies. So it's an interesting question for all of us, I'm sure. Information about heavy metals and what they do really is available on the internet. And I advise you to go into the internet and read up about it. I don't think we need to do this on the call, but many years ago when the cards first came through, David Pasakoff and I were doing experiments with detox and dark field microscopy. In dark field, there are two types of tests. One, which is the wet test, where blood is placed between two slides, and then the dry test, where blood dries on one slide of glass and then placed in the microscope. And in the dry test, one does see things like parasites, and one of the things you see is heavy metal. And we've done a series of tests over the years since then. And when David and I were playing, and this was really in the early days, I mean, very early days, we had just received the cards, but found that when we placed the triangle, and I'm sure this is something you all are aware of, place the triangle on the liver, it initiates a fairly severe or strong liver detox. And we've had some very interesting experiences around that, and I have too, David had, where you rush for water and you feel quite nauseous, and everybody around you feels nauseous because it affects everybody in the field. But then I tested out at that time, and that showed up on the dark field. And then I tested the effect on the dry test where heavy metals are detected, and came up with the detox sequence that we use in Vortex 1, where you place the triangle on the liver, right? Anybody know the other two cards? The water card, where? Detox system, not on the blood point, strangely enough, but on the detox system. And the hexagon, the air card, on the immune system. And that initiates a very powerful detox. Or was the air card on the oxygen point or the immune? I could have been the oxygen point. I haven't done it for a while. Anybody remember? Jerry? Was it on the oxygen or immune? I think it's immune. Yeah. And the combination of those cards helps to, of course, detox certain chemicals and toxins, but including heavy metals. And of course, the triangle helps that process on the liver, because the liver eventually has to detox all of that. Now, I'm sure you're all aware that heavy metal toxicity is a major symptom these days because of heavy metal toxicity in our air, in our water, in the food chain, in our cosmetics, in a variety of sources that causes a variety of nervous system disorders, blood disorders, that will even move towards dementia and Alzheimer's, so neurological effects, but also Parkinson's. A variety of conditions are attributed to heavy metal toxicity. And this is something you can read, the scientific facts of this, you can read on the internet. The way of cleansing is also available on the internet, but we would do that with cards. We would use those of you that have done Module 4, there's a heavy metal point above the ear, the right ear, one finger on the right ear, and a list of heavy metals that we use with a connector. Now, understandably, this is not a diagnosis. This is not an analysis. This is identifying and clearing the energy of the heavy metal. So we mustn't construe this as a diagnosis and treatment, but dealing with the energetic aspect of the heavy metal, as we did with parasites and infections and so on. So, but once we've cleared the energy, it is then easier for the body to eliminate the actual heavy metals. And of course, diet, superfoods, a variety of things are used to detox. Of course, one has to constantly work with the liver to help the liver detoxes, using substances like chlorella, cell food, if you have cell food, a variety of substances that help. There's a variety of combinations of herbs for heavy metal detox. Some use high doses of vitamin C, some use ozone therapy, and there's a variety. I don't want to go into that because that's more a treatment and a prescription. But always work with the cards if necessary, or the heavy metal point to initiate the actual detox at an energetic level. Any questions about this? Brief questions that come up?
Jeff,
yes, Lynn.
Can I ask, funny enough, did a heavy metals detox on a woman a couple of weeks ago, and she has a titanium screw left in her spine. They can't get it out. And so I didn't even have to use the pointer. I could just touch the spine to touch the heavy metal itself to tap it in. So, I mean, now I've done that, but like, it's obviously going to be an ongoing issue, isn't it?
Now, with metal implants, it is very, very important to neutralize the static electricity that's held, because as it absorbs static from the environment and from Wi-Fi and so on, it conducts heavy metals more readily into the bloodstream. So very important for those people to wear protection, use a square or rainbow card initially to neutralize demagnetize the actual effect of the heavy metal, because the body tends to reject that. And as we harmonize the metal implant, which of course we've learned in the teeth, but as we harmonize the metal implant, we find that there's now greater harmony and not the same extent of rejection of that metal implant. And then utilize the procedures that we have to help the detox process. So that's very important, Lynn. Thank you for that. Yes, Aurora.
I have the same problem because I have titanium screws in my face. And what I did, I have an X-ray of my, like here, and I put the rainbow card on the X-ray, it's there all the time. Will that help?
You put the rainbow card on the X-ray itself, with your name attached to it. Of course, it's your energy, it's your X-ray.
Yeah.
You may want to use a circle with a connector onto the X-ray, onto that part.
Mm-hmm. Many parts.
Yeah, several parts. And but you can choose which is the priority on the X-ray. Use a connector to the X-ray from a circle, so your connectors into the circle. Okay, with your signature, of course.
But like, and leave it there for good?
Yeah, keep testing it.
Mm.
Okay, thank you for these questions. Anyone else? All right. So one of the areas, we keep on talking about this every time, but I'm sure are aware in some countries, luckily not here in South Africa, we have massive amount of heavy metals thrown into the atmosphere through chemtrails. And chemtrails are throwing in aluminium or aluminum, strontium, barium, which is a very highly toxic, as well as strontium, heavy metal. The other things that we get from heavy metals are arsenic in the water and the food, mercury, lead, nickel, that sort of stuff. But from the atmosphere, it is polluting our food source, our vegetation, and that's one of the reasons, and there's another question around this, that we wear the small generator on the liver to help, or just underneath on the chemical point, to help support and strengthen the liver, which you can periodically use the triangle to do the detox, but it helps to support that. And there is a question about the generator card coming up. Does that suffice for everybody? Please read up about it. It's a very important area, whether you've done Module 4 or not. Really, we should all be doing this, particularly if you're in Europe, UK, United States, where there are chemtrails. These are highly toxic chemicals and heavy metals.
Jeff,
Yeah.
You did mention something about titanium being no metal. Can you just answer? She wrote a little note. Can you ask? She mentioned something about titanium being no metal, and it's used in implants. So can she?
New implant. It's called zirconium. It's not titanium. It's zirconium.
Oh,
it's from Judith.
oh, is it?
Oh, sorry. Now we have zirconium implants, no metal. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I misread it. Okay.
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 Thanks, Judith. So, interested to know how the vortex cards are charged and how Jeff experiences these down there. That's from Anne-Marie. Of course, these are questions that have been asked many times. And I've sort of tried to avoid them many times and answer them at times. So, understanding that the frequencies of the vortex cards are beyond my control, beyond my mind. I don't use intention for energizing the vortex cards. The graphics on the card, the geometry, is the signature. Or I would, if I'm just working on a magnet, I would hold that consciousness, the intent in consciousness. Say I'm working on a water card or an air card. but the geometry itself is sufficient to set the intention. And once the intention is set, I step aside, let go. I have no control. I allow the frequencies to come through. It is a profound, very deep meditation. And in the early days, I would spend several hours a day in this very, very deep meditative space, and many hours in the middle of the night. So it's interesting discerning between the different cards, but there are different frequencies, different textures, different feeling. In the early days, it was like I was being fried, burnt up alive, because they were so new and so powerful and foreign to my body at the time. But these days, it's a very, very simple process. Now, in the last couple of years, because I put out the intention that when I leave this plane, that the cards be sustained, that's somehow there will be continuity with the vortex cards. And I was given recently a series of MasterCards. This is not your typical MasterCard that you go to a store with, but there are MasterCards that are placed on a tree of life in a particular way. They help to energize the cards, even in my absence. It's taken a long, long time to produce these cards. They are very powerful on their own, and they help entrain those frequencies and put them into the magnet. So I can now make more than one or two at a time, which for many years, that was what I was doing. And it would really consume all my time, all my waking time. But now they can be done in greater numbers. I still, at this stage, even though when I go at some point, they will be able to do them without me, I still choose to put my own energy into that. Not mine, but through me. So I spend some time with them. And for me, it's a delightful process to be part of that, because it's like one of the most powerful ways of connecting as we channel that energy. So, and we have another question about connecting. So does that answer your question, Anne-Marie? Are you there somewhere? Anything else you want to know? And of course, when I first receive a card, it's just simply into a magnet, into a sheet. I don't have the geometry. It takes several months to prepare the way, to prepare the frequency. It's much less these days. But I will receive the intention sometime ahead of time as to what is coming up. And then some time to establish the geometry, even though the geometry itself doesn't do much without the charging of the cards. It still provides the connecting link, the signature. So the geometry, in a sense, is important. Good? You got it? Any other questions? And so one of these days, we'll have the Restore card. The design, hopefully, will be finalized one of these days. The card is available. It's in the mat and in the seat. And hopefully we'll have it as a separate card. We now have the eye cards, and sometimes we work on the hearing cards. Okay. Next. So, Izu, I see you have a very interesting question here. Right? I'd like to have Jeff's explanation about ET interferences. Just had a balance with the root cause, priority implant, correction points 1 and 6. How do you describe that to the client? Do you need an extra protection for yourself? Thank you so much. Anything you want to say about that, Izu? You'd have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, it was, I wanted to have your explanation. How do you interpret it? No, I see, I have obviously seen the clients really impacted by foreign energy.
Right.
We could release that foreign energy, and it really changed. She couldn't think anymore. She couldn't. Yes, her brain was completely out of service.
And how was it after the balance?
And she was. She looks very different. She was completely released. She could think again. So it was really beautiful. But
Wonderful.
it was first time for me, so I was a bit I went with the flow, and it was beautiful, but I was wondering if we have to, because it's definitely something quite powerful and very, very present, so right. I feel completely fine today as well, but I was wondering if we have to be more careful in this case and put extra protection for ourselves. And right. Also, I dosed afterwards, if I could tell her what was happening there. It right. was so I could, and we have opened the discussion about foreign energy, but I couldn't really say more. She was open and happy to find her brain back, so she didn't was really care about what was.
Right. Anyone else had ET interferences come up? Stick your hand up. So yeah, as you have just said, in terms of sharing, we would check on that. I've had situations where my mind did not want to share that, but my testing showed that I needed to. And after a couple of minutes of fighting with my higher self, I shared it, and it was very important to share it. At other times, there's nothing to share. We don't, because it can be frightening for a client. The most important thing, of course, is that we clear it. And it will not come up, of course, if we are in danger by whatever energy that is. I was once in a conference, a very big conference in Israel many, many years ago, where I was a keynote speaker, and my first balance, I called somebody from the audience. The press were all there, and the first audience had to do with some implant 15,000 years ago in Atlantis. And I fought that like crazy. I said, I'm not going to tell the client. And the audience of 150 healers from around the world. It was a 10-minute fight. I think I only had an hour, and I needed to demonstrate. Eventually I did. And in the newspaper, because the press was there, it said something about she's had this pain for 15,000 years, with a picture of me working on her. So that was headlines in Israel at the time. And then the second balance was extraterrestrial interference. And I thought, all right, that's it, forget it. I'm leaving, beam me up, I'm done. So I whisper in her ear, I said, tell me about extraterrestrial influences or interference. 1965, I think the time frame was, and she blurted out, yes, I was abducted that year. So These are not easy things to understand. I mean, we had all the press in the front row and top, very important people there. So, and they survived, and that's how life alignment started in Israel, through that weird stuff. But to understand what this is all about, and it is not easy to understand, because many people, particularly when life alignment was created in the early days, there were a lot of conscious abductions, people who were conscious or got to learn about it through hypnosis. And sometimes there are extraterrestrials that are not always for our highest benefit, that are here to learn about us and do whatever they do. And so there were a lot of abductions along the way. And I'm not sure if that happens as much these days, but in the 80s and 90s, there definitely were quite a lot. And I've done a lot of work on people that were abducted. So in these days, if it comes up, we don't have to understand it, I don't think, but know that we are interconnected with the whole galaxy. That we know. And of course, there are positive, very positive relationship to intergalactic beings, and there are some that are not so positive. And there can be an interference, whether it's an abduction or some transmission. I don't fully understand it, as many, even though I've done a lot. That certain frequencies, which answer to Aurora's question. There's certain frequencies that are transmitted into the body. There are programs, implants. So it's very connected to implants, because there are certain programs are put into people to act out certain things. Can you understand all of that? And so all we need to do is do the balance. I noticed that 1 and 6 came up, which is foreign energy, so it could be just that. Definitely the use of cards. If you're using a mat, it would greatly help, or whatever cards you use. And always be protected anyway. So I think that's as much as I could say. This is a very big subject, and we could go into crazy stuff. Yes, Jerry. Can't hear you. You muted. Unmute.
Sorry. I thought I'd unmuted it. Sometimes when I'm doing balances, the emotional process, I get the correction points 1 and 6. I've not really thought about it. Is that significant? Does it mean that it could be foreign energy that's being dealt with, although I've not seen it as foreign energy or ET interference? Would it present or could represent that?
Yeah, but you know, the way we do 1 and 6 with foreign energy, we touch 1, we touch number 6, and in that sequence, and raise our hand. But yes, it could come up as part of releasing some negative energy, which we're constantly doing. So, yeah, you could ask. All right. Izu, is that answer your question enough? Can't hear you. Unmute.
Yes, and so about extra protection, if we have the cards, it's enough. There is nothing much that.
Yeah, it wouldn't come up if you weren't protected enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
I'm sure you are using some protection and using the spin cards. You know, one of the functions of the spin cards as well is protection. If you were doing that just with your hands, you are exposing yourself to those frequencies. So what's built into the spin cards, as you know, we use the seed of life on the 1 foot away from the rainbow for extra protection. It's also independent. So as you're spinning with the seed of life and the resonance, which works in tandem, you are highly protected. You understand that? So as long as you're doing that, and I'm sure you wear cards or whatever is in the environment. Mm-hmm. So I feel, and in your experience, as you saw, you felt fine and your client felt fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
So we have from Maria, please give us advice on how to strengthen and empower. Let's do that. So, Randy, my priority was, I had a lovely balance last week. My priority was the fear body. After the balance, I've been trying to clearly understand the difference and connection between the fear body and the ego mind-driven fear. Since no question is silly, I've asked Jeff to speak about this. So you all understand the concept of the pain body, right? And it's a body that resonates and accumulates pain. And as a result, we tend to attract pain to our lives. The fear body is similar around fear. It's an accumulation of fear in a particular subtle field that actually creates like a subtle body. And what happens is, for those people that act out of fear, they attract and react to fearful conditions. Of course, then there's a neurological process there through the amygdala, a reaction, a memory through the amygdala to the hippocampus to the hypothalamus. There's a memory of fearful experiences. Now, of course, this is accumulation over lifetimes, right? We come in with this, and or family through the ancestral pattern. And so if our ancestors have gone through a lot of fearful patterns, through the Holocaust, through wars, through different situations, that fear body can be transmitted. And it's different from the normal type of fear that comes up through the neurological system, which can be neutralized through the prefrontal cortex, which knows that there's something larger than that fear and puts the amygdala to rest. It's like a mother and a child. So that's sporadic fear that might come up through the ego and the mind, whereas the fear body is an accumulation of fear in a body that has been possibly accumulating for many years and also attracts that resonant frequency to ourselves. Can you understand that, Randy? Where are you? You're moving around my screen. Can you get that? Can anyone get it?
Thank you, Jeff. That was clearing.
Okay. So those are bodies that are in Module 6, by the way. We work with that. And they tend to come up a lot, the fear and the pain body. I'm sure those of you that have done Module 6 have experienced that a lot. So Sylvia, more clarity about the differences between the two generator cards. I said we'll talk about that, both on the body besides the chemical point and then the house. So the larger generator we all have experience with, it amplifies. It's like, heavy duty artillery that amplifies everything, but also has a very strong earth connection. So it is of a much coarser frequency, not negative in that way, but it's connected down into the earth. So we use that whenever there's severe geopathic stress. And initially, when I put out the call for some solution for the chemtrails and the pollution in the atmosphere, you know, whether you believe in chemtrails or not, even if you don't, the streaks of white chemicals in the air, even if it's normal aeroplanes, which it's not, but it doesn't matter what you believe, but there's a lot of pollution that comes down. And so I was told initially to put the generator on the chemical point, but it's quite large, it's quite powerful, and it was indicated to me that we don't need that level of power for this particular purpose. And so I was instructed to make a smaller generator that is has the same frequency of the generator. For one, it's more comfortable to put under the bra or on the chemical point for male, female. And it's all that is adequate. Now, what it does is it helps to protect the body, helps to protect the liver from this pollution, but also transmits that energy of protection and cleansing, because it is cleansing, into the planet. So there is a cleansing process that goes into the planet, allowing the planet, of course, planet is way more powerful than we can ever imagine, but it helps collectively, when enough of us are doing that, to put that liver cleansing aspect into the earth we are up to cleanse. So it's a dual function. It works on our cells, works on the earth. And you can use the generator if it's comfortable for you and not too powerful. It's got about 1/2 to 2/3 of the power of the large generator, even though it's quite small. Okay? Useful information? So, this is for Emanuela. Are you here? This is a project. Someone was asked, Manuela was asked to balance a land where the owner doesn't get permission from local political authority to build some infrastructure on it. How do you think it's better to proceed with the work? To balance the land, tracing, this is using home alignment, of course, tracing the bagua as we do with a house. Is it better to start from the project, which at the moment is ready, but on paper, it's more than one building? In other words, it's a plan with drawings, but there's no physical buildings on the land. Or balance per priority, both land and buildings. And I think the last is what you would probably check out. When you're working on a project, in other words, something that is yet to come into being, we can use the plans of the buildings if they've been designed, or simply work on the land, because the blockage could be in the land. And we would do the bagua, the flow chart over the land, find the heart circle, and do a home alignment on the land. And if there may be a plan of a house that holds some of that energy, you would do it on this projected building, even though if it doesn't exist yet. So I would say, keep checking. That's all we have to do. Just keep checking. Maria, could you give us advice on how to strengthen and empower our connection with the Life Alignment Healing Team to become a clear and neutral channel to divine guidance? Also, any practical advice for centering ritual at the start of a session, and what mindset to have to bring more flow and ease to the practice, and from a space of connection with the client's higher self. So I think that's a really, really important question. I'm sure we all have our own personal ways of doing this, but it is essential before coming into a session to come into a centered, grounded, connected space, whether you use breath, you use your own meditative techniques. But if you have already become familiar with a life alignment team, you can invoke the team or your own personal guides, whatever that is, or a combination of the guides in your team, whatever you work with. The principle being that we do not do this on our own. And it is essential to create a collective field that we can call upon that actually facilitates most of the healing. If you can imagine a very large field of light and we doing our thing there, like almost like puppets, sometimes doing incorrect, and of course somehow it works anyway because the field is very present and very large. I'm sure there are lots of giggles from the field when they see what we do, but they know that one way or the other it will work out. So it's so important that we come into that neutral place, take 10, 15 minutes. Eventually it happens much, much quicker. We hold that intention and it's already there. It's already preparing before anybody comes, while you're having your breakfast or your lunch or you're going for a walk. It's already in process, whether you've done that or not. But it is good to hold the intention that we're connecting with whatever our team is for you. If you have already connected with the Life Alignment team, most of us have, whether we know it or not. And to draw that, call that team in, step aside, allow yourself to move into a very neutral space. The use of abdominal breathing is very important because it is essential to activate the vagus nerve in the body, which helps to put you into parasympathetic, which is out of fight or flight, and into rest, digest, build. Very important that we use the abdominal breathing, not chest breathing. That helps to calm us down quite dramatically. And when somebody comes in, they come into a very protected, sacred, loving space. I'm sure I don't have to say this to anybody, but it's good to reiterate this. And that is the field that does most of the work. What we do through the emotional process often is to get the mind out of the way. Questions will come up, of course, to learn, to find a place of safety, to connect, to communicate, all of that stuff. And to experience the pain. So the pain is a catalyst for moving into connection. If the person's just in their head, lying there, not experiencing anything, it's, not a whole lot happens. So the questions are designed to activate the past experience of pain, of trauma, and through that, the process works through releasing the victim, coming into responsibility, taking responsibility, making new choices, whichever questions come up. As we take responsibility and move out of victim, the client that is, and by the way, we have to have done that for ourselves to facilitate that for the client. But as the client does that, then contact is made with the larger field. So they're not small, they're not in victim. They're now beginning through the questioning to take responsibility for their lives. And otherwise, contact cannot be made when a client is still small in victim state. It just doesn't happen very easily. Something does happen, but not as simply. So please do find your own ritual. If you have the Merkaba cards, they are phenomenal to put them around you and to go into a meditative process. The mind is stilled, or anything you do for that process. Holding some of the expansion cards on a particular point, your breath of life, your tree of life, your trust, to help you to move into that space. Now, once you've done that many times, it becomes automatic. You can do this all in a couple of seconds. All right? So I'm sure while we've been talking, we've all got into connection. That's why I wanted to keep that question for the last, so that we can now move easily once we're all in that connected space. Are we all there? Anyone not? So what I'm going to do in the minutes that are remaining, find what we need to manifest. If blockages come up, last time blockages didn't come up, so we'll see what we need to do. So simply manifesting inspiration and unconditional love. Easy, isn't it? So first, the primary emotion there is actually the inspiration, which is like the breathing in, inspiring, opening up to unconditional love. That is available. And actually, our last balance really had to do with the gratitude for that which was available, the love that is accessible to all of us, that is beyond ourselves. So there are blocks. So the one word is raciness. Racy, people that are racy. And the word trial, I'm not sure what that means here, but not under a trial might be the hardship of coming into that space, or trial. Trial is also around judgment. Any thoughts about that? What do you think the word trial is here? Of course, for many, it is a hard experience, a difficult experience, coming out of the fight or flight experience. It's a trial. Any other thoughts?
Could mean that we are on trial to step up, to come into inspiration and unconditional love. You know, that we sort of being put to the test in a way, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Jeff,
Yeah.
could it also be that, like, sometimes you go and trial a new car and you give it a whirl, you give it a trial and see how you like it and how you get on with it?
That trial, absolutely. Thank you for that. Racing and a new car seems to fit. You want to race around? So it could be all of a trial, a broad meaning, but it's almost whether the judgment or whether the hardship or whatever it is, that maybe there is some challenge in transcending the raciness, because it has become such a habitual pattern for us that the world is racing. It's also on trial. So I think the most important thing is to access through inspiration. We've been building towards that, and our time is sort of getting less. You don't mind us going a few minutes over? Is that all right? And let's see, with the presence that we have invoked collectively, if we can move beyond the trial, the challenge, the judgment, and because I think most of us have felt on trial by many people. Authority figures in our lives, our parents, ourselves, our own mind, our own ego, we're constantly on trial. So here it is, just unconditional love and opening to that. So we have to let go of years of historical patterns of being on trial. How about, sound good? All right, let's go for it. So I'll at times guide you through the process if I can. But let's get into a comfortable place where we can inspire. And I think the word inspiration is relevant to what we've been talking about, to activate the vagus nerve through abdominal breathing. Make sure you're sitting erect. So that the energy can flow. And welcome the support from the field of light and love that surrounds us. And put to rest the judges and the jury. Most of that is within ourselves. And invoke, call upon the frequency of unconditional love. And as the ego mind is not familiar with that frequency, let us sense it as a reality. That comes as grace, as blessing. Let go of the fear. The interferences. The busyness. The needing to prove ourselves. To achieve. Simply to rest. And surrender to the field of unconditional love. As a direct experience, as a felt sense. Something that is tangible, is true. And we have to come out of fight or flight and busyness, raciness, to know it. And whenever you have the sensing of it as a tangible force, let's celebrate it with deep gratitude. As something that is the truth of ourselves. It awakens the experience of truly who we are. That unconditional love is who we are. It's not foreign to ourselves. So we welcome our true selves, our true essence. And allow it to come into being and action more fully than we've known. We are that. And we feel the flow of this love energy into our cells. That awakens memory of who we are. And that memory reminds us that we are all interconnected and one. So as this overriding field of love is with each one of us today, so we surrender our personalities, our mind, the ego begins to surrender. The fact that we are all so connected in love. We can forgive ourselves for being so distracted by the raciness. It was okay. But we now know that we can connect with this field whenever we lose that connection. So we give thanks for grace, for blessing. For the knowing of our interconnectedness with all beings across the universe. And that we are not alone. All finding our expression within an enormous quantum field of energy. Each of us bringing our gifts and our talents and our blessings. I want to thank you all for bringing your presence into this. Giving us the opportunity to remember who we are. Whenever we feel ready, let's bring ourselves back to our bodies, fully embodied. gratitude for each other. So, thank you for this wonderful family experience. True family. For those of you in the United States, still early in the day, enjoy the rest of the day. Those in Europe and Africa, glorious evening.
Thank you, Jeff.
Much love.
Thank you, Jeff.
Love you. Thank you, Jeff.
Love you all.
Thank you, Jeff.
See you next month.
Thank you so much.
Sometime we'll get you the date.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Jeff.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So, bye-bye.
Bye.
We need to speak sometime, Jeff. So
What's that?
we need to speak sometime quite soon when you have the moment. Okay, so give me a call.
Okay.
Okay. Lots of love.
Lots of love to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Lots of love to you.
Bye-bye from Italy.
Are you coming to the States this summer?
Yeah. August, September.
Oh.
You're going to come there. I'll see you there.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone in Life Alignment. Have a fantastic evening.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason, for your work.